Hi everybody, it's Laura. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made using the November 2024 My Creative Scrapbook Limited Edition kit. My goal for August is to get my 13 or so videos that I have had on my computer for quite a while now, edited and voiced over and up onto my channel. So I think there'll be a lot of videos this month. So this layout is going to be mainly made up of a whole bunch of strips of paper. One of the things I love about using strips of paper is the fact that I think that they look great on the layout. I love using a whole bunch of the different patterns of a collection or different collections and combining them on one layout. That looks kind of cool with all the patterns really close to each other, I think. And then also using up some leftover pieces that you might have from other layouts. A lot of times I'll use really thin strips of paper. On this layout, I thought I would mainly use strips that are a little bit wider, although I do include some thinner strips. I am thinking these are probably approximately an inch by looking at them sitting on that little mat that I have there that has the inch increments. I'm using some distress oxides and distress inks to change the color of some of them. I felt like a lot of the colors were very similar, and so I wanted to switch up just a couple of the strips of paper. So I used distress oxide in fossilized amber and peeled paint to change the color of a couple of the strips. And then I also used distress ink in vintage photo to ink the edges of them. You can see the little pile of paper to the right of my mat. There are some strips that have a scallop on them. Those are left over from another layout, but for this type of approach, those types of papers that have a different edge, a punched edge or a torn edge, I think they work really well with the other strips that are very straight. So I have this really pretty piece of background paper. It has some poinsettias on the left, but a lot of it is very neutral. So I thought that would be a good paper to choose because I'm going to be putting so many different patterns on it. And then I took a piece of kind of scrap paper that I had and I drew straight lines going across with a pen, and these help to guide me in putting down the strips of paper so they don't end up getting really crooked. So my idea was to have the strips of paper smaller on the top and bottom and then get increasingly large as they got to the center. So that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to arrange the strips. I will always rearrange them as I go along. I'll always make little adjustments, but right now I'm just trying to get an idea of where the strips of paper will go approximately. And then as, like I said, I go along, I might add something or switch something or take something away. I've been noticing on Pinterest that a lot of people take strips of paper and they weave them together. Sometimes they'll put some fibers into their woven piece. And I wanted to try something like that. I feel like that could also be a really cool way of making a background for a scrapbooking layout. So that's my next goal as far as strips of paper. I use them a lot on my layouts, but I'm always looking for different ways to use them. I've noticed that when people weave paper, they sometimes do it in a very neat way, and other times they'll do it in a messy way, and I want to try both of those ways as well, but that's for another layout. So I was thinking that the pieces at the bottom were a little bit too small. They went too abruptly from small to long, so I want to switch some of those around. I wanted to gradually go from being small at the top to a little bit wider at the center and then smaller again at the bottom. So I am temporarily satisfied with the way I have these arranged, and I'm using my ATG adhesive to attach the papers down. The strip of paper that I'm putting down right now, that I believe, it's been a while, so I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that strip and the other brown strips, I think that those were trimmed from the edge of another piece of paper when I wanted to make it smaller so that I could mount it on another piece of paper. So you could really use any strips of paper you have. And using this method really allows you to use all the different scraps, thinner ones, thicker ones, the ones with the punched edges. I think it actually looks better when you use a variety of different sizes and types and patterns of paper. And right now, this whole unit seems very visually overwhelming, but I think it'll look a little bit better when I trim it. There we go. And then I'm also going to be layering some things on top of it that will break it up a little bit. So here I'm trimming that very top yellow strip back a little bit, And then after I did that, I needed to fill in that area. So I took a leftover piece of that same green paper that I used behind this whole unit, and I attached that behind the strips, and that allowed me to add this smaller strip up at the top. I felt like that strip of yellow paper at the top was just a little bit too thick. In this case, I trimmed the strip to make it a little bit thinner, but another way to do that is to take a thin strip and just layer it over the thick strip, and that works really well too. I'm adding a little bit more of that green paper to reinforce the areas that don't have the green paper backing it. I am going to be attaching this whole piece down to a background, so I don't know why it was necessary to do that, but I felt that it was at the time. So this is my photo. This is a photo of both of my daughters on Christmas Eve, and they were funny when we were taking pictures. They both said, "Oh, let's turn around really fast." So they did that and it made their hair look kind of cool. This was back when my older daughter had really long hair, and I thought that the picture turned out kind of cute. So this is one of the many Christmas Eve photos that I'm scrapbooking. There are so many of them because I love these photos and I really love Christmas Eve. So I really don't like to waste any paper, especially this beautiful paper. So I was thinking there was no need to hide all of that paper underneath the strips of paper, and that I could cut out the piece of paper and then use it either on this layout or on some other layouts. And I do end up using some of it on the right-hand side of this layout. Now it's time finally to attach everything down to the background. I'm putting lots and lots of adhesive on the back of my strips of paper and then layer that right on top of the background. And I'm going to use the poinsettias. You can see them to the left of my mat on that piece of paper that I just cut off the background. I'm going to fussy cut those out, and I'm going to put those on the right-hand side of my layout. And I think that that will help to incorporate those poinsettias into the strips of paper. That way it won't just be strips on one side and poinsettias on the other side. There'll be a little bit of harmony between the two sides. I'm going to use this red pattern paper as a mat for my photo. I already have my photo matted on some white cardstock, and now I'm going to mat it again on this red cardstock. And I left the mat a little bit bigger than I usually do. I wanted there to be a nice, large, solid red border all around my photo. And then once again, I'm inking the edges with some distress ink. For many years, I have sent my photos out. I sent them to Snapfish. Years ago, I used to send them to Costco to be developed. So I usually have 4x6-inch photos to work with. But I do sometimes find that I want to have photos that are different sizes. So I bought a Canon selfie. And even though it's super, super handy, it's really not my favorite. I feel like the quality of the prints is good, but not fantastic. I don't know how long they're going to hold up over time. And I was just wondering if anybody had a recommendation of a small, or it doesn't have to be small, of a printer that they use for their photos that they're really happy with. Because even though I like having the selfie to use in a pinch when I need something printed out that I don't already have printed out, or I need a different size, I would like to explore other ways to print photos at home that I'm just as happy with as the photos that I send away for. So if you have a suggestion, please let me know. I would love to know what other people are using. So the strips in the background are very busy, and then I mounted my photo on a piece of pattern paper. So I thought that by putting a thin mat of red all around the outside of my photo cluster, that would help to separate it visually from the strips of paper in the background. I added those fussy cut poinsettias to the right that I was talking about earlier. And when I cut them out, I left a little border of the off-white background so that, once again, you would be able to read that. It wouldn't just kind of blend in with all those strips. That little border helps to define it. And now it's time to start embellishing the page. So I started off with a title. I used 2 stickers. I used the sticker sheet that was in the November kit. And I love the way the words Christmas and joy kind of fit into each other. There's just something about their shapes that goes together well. So I layered those 2 together under the photo. And then I also used some stars from the sticker sheet, and I added those to the right of the title. I'm using some of the dimensional flowers that come in the kit. So I have a red poinsettia on the bottom along with some other white flowers and then this little bunch of berries I thought was cute. And then I'm adding some other flowers in the opposite corner to kind of balance it out. I mean, you don't have to balance it out. You can have just one cluster of flowers placed in the right spot, but I thought that it would look nice to have a few flowers in two different places. And those branches that I'm adding now, those came with one of the packs of flowers in the kit. So just so you know, I don't know if I always make this clear enough, everything that you see is in the kit unless it's something that I mentioned that I use from my stash. So all the papers, all the embellishments, it's all from the kit. And I should also mention that the featured collection in the November 24 kit was the Simple Stories Simple Vintage Yuletide collection. So not all the products from the kit are from that collection. They are eclectic. They'll mix in a few other papers, and then the embellishments aren't necessarily from the same collection. Sometimes they are. It just all depends on what coordinates, and they put it together to make a kit that's really easy to work with, I think. I love working with kits. I feel like it helps me to limit my focus to exactly what's in the kit, and then I can pull in a couple of other things if I need to. So here I'm adding one of my very favorite embellishments, which is photo corners. I use a EK Success punch that I have in my stash, and I punched out photo corners in green paper. And now I'm ready to attach those flowers down. I'm using some gel glue to attach them down. And sometimes I'll use gel medium if the flowers are very heavy. Some flowers are heavier than others, but if they're very light like these, the gel glue usually does the trick. So then I went ahead and added glue to all of the elements in the lower right-hand corner. And then I used that opportunity to arrange them before the glue dried. I wanted to make sure I had them all in just the right spot. And now I'm adding some more little floral embellishments. These are stickers. I'm not cutting off the white edge, but I just cut it back a little bit in a few spots. I usually like to refine it a little bit. And I cut the piece into a number of smaller pieces because I only needed little bits kind of sticking out from behind the flowers. So I did kind of go overboard with this layout. I added a lot to it. I am adding a little sentiment, or not a little sentiment, a sentiment that says Merry and Bright in the upper left-hand corner, along with some poinsettias. I wanted there to be something going all along that left edge. I also put a poinsettia on the bottom. And now I'm going to add this reindeer. Once again, this is a sticker, and I'm just going in there and trimming it down a little bit. And I'm going to add that reindeer in the lower left-hand corner to kind of over embellish that whole strip there. Just hard sometimes. There's so many beautiful embellishments. I want to include them all on the page. And even though I made this layout about 10 months ago, I have it in front of me now, and I decided to change something. So I love that reindeer. I think it's a really cool embellishment, but it does kind of just look stuck over the top. There's nothing that helps to draw it into the layout, if you know what I mean. It doesn't look like it's part of it. It just looks like it's kind of layered on top. So what I did was I took the poinsettia that's underneath the reindeer, and I carefully peeled the reindeer off of it, and I carefully peeled the poinsettia off of the background, and I layered the poinsettia a little bit over the reindeer, and I think that helps to, once again, make the reindeer look like it's a little bit more part of the page and not just kind of floating on top of it. I took a sticker that had some poinsettias on it, and I fussy cut off the border, and then I added one right below the sentiment Merry and Bright, and then I added another one to the right of the reindeer. And then I went around the layout and I trimmed off a couple of little floral elements that were hanging over the edge. So now it's time to add some finishing touches. So I'm using some glossy accents. I wanted to add a little gold center to that one poinsettia because the rest of the large flowers have centers like that. And then I also added some of these gold self-adhesive pearls to the photo corners. And then I found I had this little gold bow in my stash, so I added that to the top of the picture, and then I added a little pearl to the center of that as well. And then I add a few more of these gold pearls in a couple of different places. I have to actually take a look and see if I can find more of these gold pearls. I used a lot of them when I was making my Christmas layouts last year, and I know I'm going to be making more Christmas layouts this year, so I have to kind of restock on those. I'm going to a Scrapbook Expo at the end of August, so maybe I'll be able to pick some up there. I added 2 more stickers. They were little holly sprigs. Those were on the sticker sheet. There's so much on one of those Simple Stories sticker sheets, so it's so tempting to keep adding things. And then I added some more pearls to the corners of the Merry and Bright sentiment, and I added one to the eye in Christmas, and the layout is complete. Here are some close-ups. For the close-up of the reindeer, I included a picture of the way it looks now with the flower layered on top of it, but you'll see in the final picture that it's the old way with the flower behind it. So thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really, really appreciate every single view. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to watch this video. I hope that you enjoyed watching it. I'll have a lot more videos coming up, so I hope you'll join me for those. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.